Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news we got for Monster Hunter Rise on the Nintendo Switch. And this is it. This is that big information dump of the big 3.0 update that Capcom will be revealing us on tomorrow, May 26th. We now know firsthand from a trusted source everything that we will be able to see starting in their stream for this big 3.0 update. Now do keep in mind that things are probably still going to change, but for the most part we now basically know everything that they're going to be showing. So right away I want to start with obviously All Mother Narwa and basically clarifying and confirming that this will indeed be a fight between you and Ibushi and Narwa at the same time. They're actually calling this a double boss fight. Now within the last video that I made a couple of days ago, I theorized that this perhaps could have been one of several things where you perhaps are fighting Ibushi and Narwa's offspring, or perhaps you're fighting a merged version of them or something along those lines. But it turns out that's not the case. You're actually fighting Ibushi and Narwa as independent creatures, as they basically are in the world of Monster Hunter Rise, but you are actually just fighting them at the same time. You are not killing one and then fighting the other, loading screen, any of that. Nope, you're fighting both of them at the same time. Obviously you'll be able to fight them online. You can also solo them, of course, but this is basically a double boss fight. This is the first time that the series, I believe, has actually introduced this method of fighting monsters and stuff like that. So it's interesting that they're doing this with basically at the end of the game, finishing the story. But that's basically what we have here, a double boss fight with Ibushi and Narwa firsthand in Monster Hunter Rise. Moving right along, we now know that obviously Apex Snowgre will be the filler Apex monster in this specific update. We did talk about in the last video that obviously just like Rathalos and Diablos, you should be able to now fight Apex Snowgre. This isn't necessarily much of a surprise, but we now have the confirmation that you will be fighting him, and he might not be the only Apex monster that we might be able to see in this update, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But first, I actually want to be able to gladly tell all of you guys that now Crimson Glow Valstrax is confirmed. You will be seeing them in the big 3.0 update. You will be seeing them soon. And this is a direct variant monster. This is not the original Valstrax that we know from previous games. So do keep that in mind. This is basically the very first introduction of a variant monster in Monster Hunter Rise. Every other monster that we have in the game so far has been the base version of what they are. But now we are actually seeing that the first variant will be Crimson Glow Valstrax. And we also know now that he's fully red. So basically, like in the artwork that I showed in the thumbnail, and for clarification's sakes, that is a digital card from Teppen, one of the failed Capcom trading card games that they put out on PC a few years ago. There's a link in the video description if you actually want to see the official artwork from that game, from the fandom wiki. But this is not official like Monster Hunter Rise art or anything like that, so I just wanted to clarify that for full transparency. But we also now know that Crimson Glow Valstrax will come with a revamped and remade brand new introduction song that you should be able to hear as he is introduced as you're about to fight him, and even in the trailer. So you should be able to hear a brand new track for this monster that is also being revamped completely. So for everyone who hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on all the videos asking me, hey, when are we getting Valstrax? When are we getting Valstrax? We're getting Valstrax very soon. Believe me, it's sooner than you actually expect. Now, if you thought Valstrax was the hype moment, think again. There's 3 other monsters that are also going to be shown and introduced for the big 3.0 update. Now, the sad thing is, I'm actually going to read what I wrote down here because I want to get it right. The sad thing is that the source isn't actually naming any of these monsters at the time of this recording, and I can't sit here and start listing off names and guess as to what they could actually be. We do know that they are returning monsters. They are not new monsters built from the ground up for Monster Hunter Rise, so you can actually discard that idea right away. But we do know that they are monsters that are basically returning from previous games. Now, do we actually know if they are monsters that are returning from Monster Hunter World? I can't really clarify that because we don't know. The reason why I mentioned Monster Hunter World is because we have known for quite a while that a lot of the monsters that are going to be introduced in Rise as DLC will be monsters that you saw in Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Iceborne. But as of right now, we don't actually know if these are monsters that are returning from World, or if they're actually monsters returning from older games with a brand new skin and a couple of new moves and stuff like that. So we don't actually know what these 3 new returning monsters are, but we do know that there's 3 of them in total. So a lot of people spoke about maybe Devil Joe could show up. In the last video that I made, talked about Apex Tigrex, Apex Rajang, and even Apex Lagambi. Any of these monsters are a possibility, and that's the interesting thing about this, that they don't clarify if they're monsters, just typical basic monsters, or they're Apex monsters. So I theorize, and this is my personal take, that they are most likely, one of them at the very least, an Apex monster. Could be Tigrex. A lot of people in the comments said it could be Lagambi, so you know, it could be it. But we don't actually know what these 3 returning monsters are. I do apologize for not having the details. I'm very good about having details, but I don't have them in this case. But do expect 3 other returning monsters on top of Apex Sinogre, All Mother Narwa, and Crimson Glow Valstrax. Then there's a slew of other updates, and I'm just going to try to go over as quickly as possible because there's just so many of them. The next update will be taking place in June, and this update will actually introduce the idea of collaborations with that very specific update. To be clear, they are not calling it a 4.0 update as of the time of this recording. That could obviously change once we actually see the trailer. But basically for now, we don't know if this is going to be like a 4.0 type of update with the introduction of new monsters and collaborations at the same time. The source does clarify that within the next 3 months, you can expect a whole bunch of collaboration updates. So if you have questions like, well, does that mean that there's just going to be layered armors plus on top of new monsters being introduced? Guess what? I have the same questions as well, because I don't have the answer to that. But we do know that collaborations are starting to show up at the beginning of next month with the next update going forward. Whether that update is called 4.0 is anybody's guess. Regarding new areas, and one of the things that I got asked a lot in the last video is that we will be seeing a new boss fight map for the dual boss fight, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a brand new fully explorable area like people thought would be like the Coral Grounds or something like that. That's not the case. You will be fighting All Mother Narwa. You will be fighting them in a new area, but they're not necessarily a new fully explorable map. The update is also going live on May 27th, so do keep that in mind. That's the date that they provided us with. So basically the day after the stream, you should be able to see this stuff go up live pretty much for everybody worldwide. As to whether Capcom actually decides to provide this update, you know, for everybody at the same time, they have not been able to do that in the past couple of updates, so I wouldn't necessarily expect them to do that this time around, but do expect it to go live on May 27th. Another thing that they're also adding is the option for Rampage weapons to have layered looks, layered armor for your Rampage weapons. And it's actually a system that's very reminiscent to the system in Monster Hunter Iceborne, where you could add and remove parts, but it's kind of vague. So I do apologize for that. But basically we now know that Rampage weapons will have layered armor looks, so you can change the way that they look. Just to be clear, this does not mean that normal basic weapons can be changed to look like other weapons. That's not what's happening. But Rampage weapons will have that option going forward. 2 quick things that I do want to touch upon that were also mentioned is that obviously there will be new Apex quests for Apex Rathalos and Apex Diablos, where you can now fight them in the wild. This is something that I talked about in my last video that we should expect, and we now know that it's actually going to happen. So basically in the next update, whether it is 4.0 or whatever they're going to call it, we should be able to expect Apex Sinogre to have his very own quest where you can fight them out in the wild, and you don't necessarily have to worry about doing Rampage quests to be able to take these monsters down. At the same time, we also now know that there's going to be obviously a new cosmetic 3.0 DLC bundle available from Capcom. This is the stuff that basically they sell and you can buy off for a specific price. The first one was $20, the last one was $30. And the only thing that's worth mentioning in this one is that they are introducing a Windrake Kahoot layered armor. So if you care about your Kahoot looking cool, they are going to have a new layered armor that looks like a Windrake, which I believe is one of those capturable monsters from Monster Hunter World that looks like a pterodactyl. And the last thing that we're going to mention that we are going to be able to see in the big 3.0 update being revealed is that new weapons, and interestingly enough, new armor craftable options will be made available. In the last video that I made, I spoke about how there's an entire new tier of weapons that was most likely going to get introduced, because weapons like Narwa and even Mizuzune don't have their last tier of weapons available, and now we're going to be able to see that last tier become available for those specific weapons that are missing their last strongest type. However, the introduction of new armor sets not necessarily tied to monsters that are going to be added is something that I shouldn't have necessarily expected, I didn't think of at the time, and now we know that it will. My guess is that it has something to do with Argosy and more like craftable stuff that you can find from there, because there were a couple of Argosy items added into the game in the 2.0 update. So expect that to be something that you can send out your buddies to be able to collect you some goodies and make some more extra items based off of that. But that's going to be it for this video, man. The big 3.0 update is going to be soon enough, and we now know just about everything that is going to be introduced, with the obvious exception that there's 3 monsters that are returning that we don't necessarily have the name of as of yet. Now that could change throughout the day. Obviously, they could provide us with more information. If that does happen, I'll put a quick follow-up to this video. But if that doesn't change, I hope you guys are excited for the big 3.0 reveal, and everyone who's hoping for Valstrax, believe me, I'm happy to tell you, he's back, and you're going to enjoy getting your butt kicked by him. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya!